The last person I expected to see standing at my office door was my sister Valerie. Yet there she was, designer clothes replaced by a wrinkled blouse, perfect makeup traded for dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, I barely recognized her. "Sylvia, I need your help." Her voice cracked on the last word. I gripped my coffee mug tighter, frozen in place. 10 years of silence stretched between us like a chasm. 10 years since she'd run to our parents with her concerns about my lifestyle, painting me as the family disgrace. 10 years since I'd been cut off without a penny to my name. "How did you even find me?" I managed to ask, proud that my voice remained steady. "Everyone knows about Horizon Tech's rising star CEO." A weak smile flickered across her face. "My little sister, making waves in the business world." I set my mug down carefully. "I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested. Please, just hear me out." She stepped forward and I noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "Parker left me. He took everything. The house, the cars, our savings. I have nowhere else to go." The irony wasn't lost on me. Perfect Valerie, Mom and Dad's golden child, now standing in my office looking like a lost puppy. The same sister who'd told our parents I was living in sin because I'd moved in with my boyfriend at 22. The same sister who'd nodded approvingly when Dad changed the locks and Mom said I was dead to them. "Monica, can you reschedule my 10 a.m.? I called out to my business partner, who was hovering anxiously by her desk. She nodded, shooting me a concerned look. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "You have 5 minutes." Valerie sank into it, her shoulders slumping. Parker was having affairs, multiple affairs. When I confronted him, She swallowed hard. He had everything in his name. The prenup. I was so stupid, Sylvia. I signed without reading it properly. Now I'm staying at a motel, living off my credit cards. "And let me guess, you've already been to Mom and Dad?" She nodded miserably. "They said I made my bed by marrying Parker against their wishes, that I should pray for guidance." I couldn't help but laugh. Sounds familiar, except in my case, the only sin was wanting to live my own life. "I was wrong," Valerie whispered. "What I did to you, I was jealous. You were always so brave, so sure of yourself. I thought if I could prove to Mum and Dad that I was the good daughter—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "I don't need your apologies now that you're desperate. They're 10 years too late." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I know, but you're my only hope, Sylvia. I don't have anyone else." Looking at her now, I remembered the sister who used to braid my hair before school, who taught me how to ride a bike, who turned into a stranger the day she chose our parents' approval over our bond. My phone buzzed, a text from Monica. "Whatever you're thinking, be careful." I studied Valerie's face, searching for any trace of manipulation, but all I saw was defeat. The mighty had fallen, and karma had done its work without any help from me. "There's a spare room in my condo," I heard myself say. "You can stay there temporarily while you figure things out. But we're not sisters anymore, Valerie. This is business. You'll work at my company to earn your keep, starting at entry level like everyone else." Her eyes widened. "You'd do that? After everything? Don't mistake this for forgiveness." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Consider it a front-row seat to see everything you and our parents said I'd never achieve. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an actual meeting to prepare for." She rose shakily, clutching her worn purse. "Thank you, Sylvia. I won't let you down." "You already did that once," I replied coldly. "Monica will give you the spare key and address. Be out of that motel by tonight." As I watched her hurry out, Monica appeared in my doorway. "You sure about this?" I picked up my tablet, pulling up the quarterly reports. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing them exactly what they threw away. But as I tried to focus on the numbers, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The lost little girl inside me, the one who'd cried herself to sleep after being disowned, was screaming that I was making a mistake. The businesswoman I'd become knew better. This wasn't about helping Valerie. This was about proving something to myself. and maybe, just maybe, about finally laying some ghosts to rest. I spent that evening watching Valerie unpack her meager belongings into my pristine guest room. Her entire life had been reduced to 2 suitcases, a far cry from the walk-in closets she used to brag about at Parker's mansion. "The bathroom's through there," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I leave for work at 7 sharp. Be ready." She nodded, carefully hanging a wrinkled blouse. "I still can't believe how beautiful your place is. The view of the city, amazing what you can achieve when you stop letting others dictate your life." I checked my phone, pretending not to notice her flinch. "There's leftover Thai in the fridge if you're hungry." "Sylvia," she turned to face me, wringing her hands. "Can we talk? Really talk? I have work to review. Please, just tell me what happened after I told Mom and Dad about Jason." The name of my ex-boyfriend hit like a punch to the gut. "You mean after you painted me as some kind of deviant for moving in with him?" "Let's see." I ticked off points on my fingers. I lost my family, my home, my college funding. Worked 3 jobs while finishing my degree. Lived on ramen and coffee until Monica and I got our first investor. What else would you like to know? "I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing." The words exploded out of me. "You don't get to ease your conscience now. Where were you when I needed my big sister? When I was sleeping on friends' couches? When I graduated and there wasn't a single family member in the audience?" Valerie sank onto the bed, shoulders shaking. "I was wrong. So wrong. I let Mom and Dad's expectations consume me until I couldn't see straight. Then I married Parker because he checked all their boxes. Successful, religious, from a good family." She laughed bitterly. "Look how well that turned out." "What exactly did Parker do?" I found myself asking, curiosity winning over anger. "He was sleeping with his secretary. Classic, right? But it gets better." She wiped her eyes. "He was also sleeping with his partner's wife and embezzling company funds to maintain his lifestyle. When it all came out, he transferred everything to offshore accounts and disappeared." "And you had no idea?" "I was the perfect obedient wife, never questioned the late nights or business trips, just like I was the perfect obedient daughter." She met my eyes. "I envied you, you know, your courage to live authentically. I thought following all the rules would keep me safe, loved. Instead..." My phone buzzed, a text from Lucas, our head of product development. "Need your input on the new interface design. Free for coffee tomorrow." I ignored it, focusing on Valerie. "Why didn't you fight the prenup? Parker's lawyers are better than anything I could afford. Besides..." She pulled out a folder from her suitcase. "Look at these clauses. He had it all planned from the start." I scanned the document, my business instincts kicking in. "This is predatory as hell. Have you shown this to anyone else?" "Who would help me? I can't even afford a consultation." An idea sparked. Dangerous, possibly stupid, but potentially perfect. What if you could? What if you could not only fight back, but show Parker exactly what it feels like to lose everything? Valerie looked up, confusion clear on her face. "What do you mean? Our company's legal team is one of the best in the city, and I happen to know Parker's firm is trying to land a contract with us." I smiled, the kind of smile that had made more than one competitor nervous. "Tomorrow you start in our mailroom, but if you prove yourself trustworthy, maybe we can help each other with something bigger." "You'd do that? Help me take him down?" "Don't mistake this for sisterly love," I warned. "This is business. Parker's firm has resources we want. If exposing his fraud helps us acquire those resources while giving you justice, well, that's just efficient." For the first time, I saw a flash of the old Valerie, the sharp, determined sister I'd once admired. "Tell me what you need me to do. First, prove you can handle basic responsibilities. Show up on time, do your job well, keep your drama to yourself. Then we'll talk strategy." I headed for the door, pausing in the doorway. "And Valerie, if this is some kind of act, if you betray me again..." "I won't," she said quietly. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I won't." Later that night, As I lay in bed, reviewing quarterly projections, I received another text from Lucas. Heard about your sister. You okay? I stared at the message, thinking about the day's events. Was I okay? I had my estranged sister sleeping down the hall, a risky business play forming in my mind, and years of buried emotions threatening to surface. I'm fine, I typed back. Just business as usual. But as I set my phone down, I wondered who I was really trying to convince. And this is where the magic happens, I announced, leading Valerie through our development floor. Her eyes widened at the sleek workstations, the wall-to-wall screens displaying code and designs. 3 years ago, this was all just sketches in my notebook. Now we're revolutionizing user interface design. It's incredible, she whispered, taking it all in. I had no idea technology could be so beautiful. Sylvia, Lucas jogged up to us, tablet in hand. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got an issue with the new security protocols. The client meeting's in 2 hours. I turned to Valerie. Monica will show you to the mailroom. Remember what we discussed, 7:30 sharp tomorrow. As she followed Monica away, Lucas raised an eyebrow. So that's the infamous sister. Let's focus on the security protocols, I said, taking the tablet. But before I could dive in, Monica came rushing back. We have a problem, she said, her face tense. Someone accessed our development servers last night. They copied files, including the new interface designs. My stomach dropped. What? How is that possible? The access came from inside the building, someone with credentials. Lucas swore under his breath. The timing couldn't be worse. The investors are expecting a preview of the unique features next week. I straightened my spine, mind racing. Lock down all sensitive files, start a trace on the data breach, and get me a list of everyone who had access to that server in the last 48 hours. Already on it, Monica said. But Sylvia, your sister's arrival and this breach. Don't, I cut her off. Valerie doesn't have access to anything important yet. Besides, she barely knows how to use a smartphone, let alone hack servers. People can surprise you, Lucas said gently, and not always in good ways. I was about to respond when my phone rang, an unknown number. Hello? Sylvia, it's Mom. The world tilted sideways. 10 years of silence, and now this. How did you get this number? Valerie told us where she was staying. Mum's voice was exactly as I remembered, soft but steely. What game are you playing with your sister? Game? She came to me for help, something you refused to give her. She needs to return to her husband and pray for guidance, not enable your lifestyle. I laughed, harsh and bitter. My lifestyle? You mean my successful company, my penthouse? The life I built after you threw me away? We did what was necessary. No, you did what was easy. And now you're doing it to Valerie too. Goodbye, Mum. I hung up, hands shaking. Lucas touched my arm gently. Hey, you okay? Fine, I snapped, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, it's just complicated. Family usually is. He smiled sympathetically. Come on, I'll buy you a coffee. We can work through these protocols together. At the cafe across the street, I watched him pull up the security specifications on his laptop. Lucas had been one of my first hires. Brilliant, kind, and refreshingly drama-free. Sometimes I caught him looking at me when he thought I wouldn't notice, but he never crossed professional boundaries. What if we restructured the authentication process? He suggested, pointing to a section of code. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Monica. Server trace complete. You need to see this. Rain check on the coffee, I said, standing up. Keep working on those protocols. Back in my office, Monica closed the door behind us. The breach came from the executive floor. Someone used your credentials, Sylvia. That's impossible. I never share my login. There's more. She handed me a tablet. Look at the timing of the access. 2 a.m. last night. The building logs show your keycard was used to enter at that time. My blood ran cold. My keycard, the spare I'd given Valerie. I hate to say it, Monica began. Then don't. I cut her off. my mind whirling. We need proof before we make accusations. Set up discreet monitoring on all executive access points, and get me everything you can find on Parker's current business dealings. You think this goes beyond Valerie? I think nothing in my family is ever simple. I stared out my office window at the city below. And I think it's time to find out exactly what my sister is up to. Monica paused at the door. Just be careful, okay? You've worked too hard to let family drama destroy everything. But as I watched Valerie efficiently sorting mail through the office window, I wondered if I was being paranoid or not paranoid enough. Was she really here for help, or was this all an elaborate setup? And if so, who was really pulling the strings? The answer, I suspected, would cost me far more than just peace of mind. I stayed late that evening, watching through my office window as employees trickled out. Valerie had left at exactly 5, head down, clutching her purse. The perfect picture of a humbled sister, almost too perfect. The security footage from last night played on my laptop. There she was, entering at 2 a.m., heading straight for the executive floor. Not wandering or hesitant, but purposeful. Still here? Lucas appeared in my doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Just reviewing some footage. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Did you finish the security patch? All done, but that's not why I'm here. He sat down across from me. I did some digging on Parker. I raised an eyebrow. I don't recall asking you to do that. No, but you had that look. He grinned. The one you get when you're plotting something. Anyway, you'll want to see this. He pulled out his tablet, showing me a series of news articles and financial records. Parker's company is in trouble. Major trouble. They're hemorrhaging clients, and there are whispers of an SEC investigation. Which is why they're so desperate to land our contract, I murmured, pieces clicking into place. Exactly. And guess who's been meeting with their board regularly for the past month? He swiped to another document. Your sister's divorce lawyer. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What? The same lawyer who drafted that supposedly ironclad prenup. Lucas leaned forward. Sylvia, this doesn't feel right. A memory surfaced. Valerie at 16, orchestrating an elaborate scheme to get me grounded so she could go to a party Mum and Dad had forbidden. She'd always been smarter than people gave her credit for. I need to get home, I said, standing abruptly. Thanks for the coffee. And the intel. The drive home was a blur of possibilities, each worse than the last. When I entered my condo, Valerie was sitting at the kitchen island, typing on her phone. Productive first day? I asked casually, setting down my bag. Everyone's been so kind, she said, not looking up. Especially Lucas. He showed me how to use the coffee machine. Did he? I opened my laptop, pulling up the building's security feed. Funny how quickly you're learning your way around, almost like you've been there before. Her fingers stilled on the phone. What do you mean? Cut the act, Valerie. I saw the footage from last night. Want to tell me what you were doing in my office at 2 a.m.? She set her phone down slowly. I couldn't sleep. I was just exploring. With my key card, straight to the executive floor. I turned the laptop to show her the footage. Try again. You don't understand. Then make me understand. I slammed my hand on the counter. Are you working with Parker? Is this some elaborate scheme to steal our tech? No, she stood up, eyes flashing. I'm trying to save you. That stopped me cold. What? Parker's not just after your company's contract. He's planning a hostile takeover. She ran a hand through her hair. The prenup, the affairs, the embezzlement, it was all a setup. He needed me to come to you, to get inside. And you agreed to help him. At first, but then I saw what you've built, what you've become. Her voice cracked. I couldn't do it. I couldn't destroy my sister again. Why should I believe you? She pulled out a USB drive from her purse. Because I copied everything. Parker's real financials, the takeover plans, proof of his offshore accounts. I was going to give it to you tomorrow, but... I stared at the drive, my mind racing. If you're lying, I'm not. She stepped forward. Sylvia, I know I don't deserve your trust, but Parker is dangerous. When he realizes I've turned on him, he'll come after you, I finished. Both of us. I'll leave tonight, she said quietly. You can turn the evidence over to the SEC anonymously. I'll disappear somewhere he can't find me. I thought about the scared little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the sister who'd betrayed me, the woman standing before me now, finally choosing me over everything else. No, I said firmly, we do this together, but this time we do it my way. What do you mean? I picked up my phone, dialing Monica's number. We're going to set a trap, and when Parker thinks he's won, we'll show him exactly what happens when he underestimates the Santiago sisters. For the first time in 10 years, Valerie and I shared a real smile. It felt like coming home, and like going to war. Mom and Dad won't approve, she said softly. When have they ever? I replied, already planning our next move. Time to write our own rules. The conference room felt too small for all the tension it contained. Monica sat to my right, Lucas to my left, while Valerie paced nervously by the window. On the screen before us, Parker's smug face filled the video call. I must say, Sylvia, I'm impressed, he said, adjusting his expensive tie. Your company's growth is remarkable. I can see why my firm is so interested in this partnership. Funny you should mention partnerships, I replied coolly. We've been reviewing your proposal, and I have some concerns about the terms. His smile didn't waver. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner. I'm in town next week. Actually, I glanced at Valerie, who had stopped pacing. I think we should discuss it now, particularly the clause about board seat distribution after the merger. A flicker of something, surprise, concern, crossed his face. Those terms are fairly standard. Standard for a hostile takeover, you mean? I pulled up a document on the screen, splitting it with his video feed. These are your real financials, Parker, not the ones you showed our board. The color drained from his face. Did you really think Valerie was stupid enough to fall for your plan? I stood up, letting my anger show. That she'd help you destroy her sister's company to save herself? Valerie, he barked out a laugh, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. My dear, what lies has she been telling you? She's the one who came to me with the idea. Show her, darling. Valerie stepped forward. You mean these emails? She pulled up another document. The ones where you threatened to expose my involvement in your embezzlement schemes if I didn't help you. I kept everything, Parker. Every threat, every fake document, every recording. You recorded. He caught himself, mask slipping. This is ridiculous. I have the best lawyers in the city. Not anymore, Monica chimed in. They dropped you this morning. Something about potential RICO charges. Lucas slid a folder across the table. We sent copies of everything to the SEC. They're very interested in your creative accounting practices. Parker's composure cracked completely. You bitch, he snarled at Valerie. After everything I gave you. You gave me nothing but lies, Valerie shot back. You took everything from me, thinking I was too weak to fight back, but you forgot something important. And what's that? I'm a Santiago sister. She smiled, and I saw our mother's steel in her eyes. We don't break, we get even. The door opened and 2 FBI agents walked in. Mr. Parker, one said, we need you to stay on this call. We're currently executing a search warrant at your office. Parker's face contorted. This isn't over. Your company won't survive the scandal. Actually, I interrupted, our stock is up 15% in pre-market trading. Turns out investors love a company that helps take down corporate fraud. Now, I believe these agents have some questions for you. I ended the call feeling lighter than I had in years. Monica immediately pulled up our stock ticker, grinning at the numbers. Lucas squeezed my shoulder supportively. I'll start drafting the press release, Monica said, heading for the door. Lucas, can you? Already on it, he replied, following her out. But he paused, looking back at me. For what it's worth, that was badass. Once we were alone, Valerie collapsed into a chair. I can't believe we did it. We're not done yet, I reminded her. The FBI will want statements, there'll be a trial. Sylvia, she reached for my hand, Thank you for believing me, for helping me fight back. I let her hold my hand for a moment before pulling away. You took a huge risk copying those files. I had to choose, she said simply. Between the life I thought I wanted and the sister I knew I needed, I chose better this time. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. We saw the news. Your father and I are very disappointed. They'll never change, will they? Valerie asked, reading the message over my shoulder. No, I replied, deleting the message without responding. But maybe we have. So what happens now? Before I could answer, Lucas poked his head back in. Sorry to interrupt, but you both need to see this. Someone leaked photos of Parker being escorted out of his office. Twitter's going crazy. I looked at Valerie and saw my own mixture of exhaustion and triumph reflected in her face. Now, I said, standing up, we face whatever comes next, together. Together, she echoed, following me out. As we walked through the office, employees stopped to stare and whisper. But for the first time since Valerie had shown up at my door, I felt completely certain about my choices. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming strong enough to save the people who once hurt you, even if those people are family, especially if they're family. The knock on my office door came just after lunch. I looked up to see Monica's worried face. They're here. I didn't need to ask who. Through the glass walls, I could see them, Mom and Dad, looking exactly as they had 10 years ago. Mom in her perfectly pressed dress, Dad in his business suit, both wearing expressions of stern disappointment. Want me to tell them you're in a meeting? Monica offered. No. I straightened my desk, a habit from childhood. Send them in and find Valerie. They entered like they owned the place, Mom first, Dad following her lead, just as he always had. Quite an empire you've built, Mom said, looking around my office. Though I question the methods. Hello to you too, Mom. I gestured to the chairs. What brings you here? Your sister's accusations against Parker are all over the news, Dad said, remaining standing. Do you have any idea what this is doing to our reputation in the community? Your reputation? I couldn't help laughing. Parker committed fraud, embezzled millions, and tried to steal my company. But you're worried about your reputation. We raised you better than this, Mom snapped. Airing family dirty laundry in public. Parker isn't family, Valerie's voice cut in. She stood in the doorway, shoulders back, chin high. And neither are you, not anymore. Mom recoiled like she'd been slapped. How dare you? No, how dare you? Valerie stepped into the office. You threw Sylvia away for living her life. Then you turned your backs on me when I needed help. Some parents you are. We gave you everything, Dad protested. You gave us conditions, I corrected, rules, expectations, but never acceptance, never real love. Love? Mom's voice cracked. Everything we did was out of love. We wanted to protect you from what? Valerie demanded. From success? From independence? Look around, Mom. Sylvia built all this after you abandoned her. And me, I followed all your rules, married the man you approved of, and he nearly destroyed me. A commotion outside drew our attention. Through the glass, we could see Lucas arguing with someone, a man in an expensive suit who looked remarkably like Parker. Security, Monica called out, but the man had already pushed past Lucas and burst into my office. James, Mom breathed. What are you doing here? Your son-in-law called me, Parker's lawyer said smugly. You're making a terrible mistake, Sylvia. We can still settle this quietly. Like you settled Parker's other problems? I stood up slowly. How many companies has he destroyed with your help, James? I'm here as a family friend. No, Dad interrupted, surprising everyone. You're here because Parker paid you, just like you paid off the investigators in the Thompson case last year. Mum turned to him, shocked. Harold. I've kept quiet too long, Dad continued. Watched too many lives ruined because we were too proud to admit we might be wrong. He faced me directly. Starting with yours, Sylvia. Sir, James started, but Dad held up his hand. Get out of my daughter's office. Both my daughter's office. James glanced between all of us, then backed away. You'll be hearing from our legal team. Looking forward to it, I replied calmly. I'm sure the FBI will be very interested in your involvement too. After he left, the silence was deafening. Mom had sunk into a chair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. I should have spoken up sooner, Dad said quietly. Should have stood up to your mother, to the community pressure, to all of it. Harold, please, Mom whispered. No, Rose, look at them. Really look. He gestured to Valerie and me. Our daughters are stronger together than we ever were apart. Maybe it's time we learned from them. Mom's lips trembled. I don't know how. Start by listening, Valerie suggested, her voice gentler than before. Really listening, without judgment. And maybe, I added, surprising myself, we can have dinner. Not to fix everything, but to try understanding each other. I'd like that, Dad said, and for the first time in years I saw tears in his eyes. Mom stood up shakily. I need time to think. Take it, I said. We've all got healing to do. After they left, Valerie turned to me. Did that really just happen? I think Dad just chose us over their perfect image, I mused. Never saw that coming. Lucas appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? I looked at Valerie, saw my own mix of hope and caution reflected in her eyes. No, I answered honestly, but maybe, eventually, it will be. Sometimes the hardest walls to break down are the ones we build ourselves. But standing there with my sister, watching our parents walk away, not in anger this time, but in thought, I realized that maybe some walls need to fall, even if we're not quite ready for what's on the other side. The restaurant was quieter than I expected for a Friday night. Maybe that's why Mum chose it. Fewer witnesses in case things went wrong. Dad sat beside her, fidgeting with his napkin, while Valerie and I faced them across the table. Your company's stock hit a new high today, Dad said, breaking the awkward silence. I've been following the markets. The Parker scandal actually helped us, I replied, sipping my wine. Investors love a redemption story. Speaking of Parker, Mom cut in, the country club board is absolutely mortified. They've revoked his membership. Valerie snorted. I'm sure that's devastating for him, considering he's facing federal charges. Rose, Dad warned quietly as Mom bristled. We're here to listen, remember? The waiter arrived to take our orders, providing a welcome interruption. As he walked away, Lucas appeared at our table. Sorry to interrupt, he said, tablet in hand. Sylvia, we just got the final settlement offer from Parker's team. Mom straightened. Perhaps we should discuss this in private. No, I said firmly. No more secrets. What's the offer, Lucas? He handed me the tablet. They'll drop all claims to company assets if we withdraw our evidence from the FBI investigation. Absolutely not, Valerie and I said simultaneously. Girls, Mum started, sometimes it's better to handle these things quietly. Like you handled throwing me out, I challenged. Or abandoning Valerie when she needed help. That's not fair, she protested. None of it was fair. Valerie's voice rose. Do you know what it was like, living up to your impossible standards, always afraid of making one wrong move? We wanted to protect you. By suffocating us. I leaned forward. By making us choose between your love and our own happiness. Enough. Dad's voice cut through the tension. Rose, our daughters are right. We've been wrong, terribly wrong. Mom's hand shook as she reached for her water. I don't know how to be different. Start by telling us why, I said softly. Why was appearance more important than our happiness? She was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, my mother left us when I was 12, just walked away from her family. The shame, the whispers, the pity, I swore my children would never face that, would never give anyone reason to gossip. So you controlled us instead, Valerie concluded. I thought I was protecting you. Mom's eyes filled with tears. But I just drove you away, didn't I? Lucas cleared his throat. I should go. But Sylvia, we need an answer on the settlement. I looked at the offer again, then at my family. Tell them no deal. Some things are worth fighting for. After he left, Dad reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you, both of you, the way you've handled this, supported each other. We learned it somewhere, I said, squeezing his hand. Even if we had to redefine it our own way. I want to try, Mum said suddenly, to be different, to listen. I can't promise I'll always understand, but... She took a shaky breath. I miss my daughters. Valerie and I exchanged glances. Years of hurt couldn't be erased in one dinner, but maybe they could begin to heal. Start with this, Valerie suggested. Come to the courthouse next week. When Parker's arraigned, show everyone where you really stand. Mom hesitated, then nodded. What should I wear? We all laughed, breaking the tension. Something that shows you're not afraid of gossip anymore, I suggested. The waiter returned with our food, and conversation shifted to lighter topics. Dad asked about the company's expansion plans. Mom actually listened when Valerie talked about her new job in our marketing department. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As we were leaving, Lucas texted me. Parker's team leaked the settlement refusal to the press. You're trending. I showed Valerie the message. She grinned. Let them talk. We're done hiding. Girls, Mom called from the doorway. Your father and I. We'd like to come see your office properly, if that's all right. Next week, I said. After the arraignment. She nodded, understanding the condition. Next week then. Walking to our cars, Valerie nudged my shoulder. Think this will last? I don't know, I answered honestly, but for the first time, I think they're actually trying. Speaking of trying, she smirked, I saw how Lucas looks at you. Focus on the family drama at hand, I laughed, but felt my cheeks warm. Sometimes the biggest victories aren't in grand gestures or public takedowns. Sometimes they're in small moments. A mother asking to listen, a father admitting his mistakes, sisters finding their way back to each other, and sometimes, just sometimes, they're in finally being brave enough to let people in again. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, their cameras flashing as Parker was led in handcuffs through the main entrance. I stood with Valerie, watching him shuffle past in his designer suit, now wrinkled from custody. Ms. Santiago, they called out, any comment on the charges? Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. My daughters will not be commenting today. Mom strode up the steps, wearing a bright red dress that stood out among the sea of suits. Dad followed close behind, his hand supportively on her back. The reporters' cameras went wild. Everyone knew the story of our family rift by now. Mrs. Santiago, are you supporting your daughters against your son-in-law? Former son-in-law, Mum corrected firmly. And yes, I stand with my daughters, always. Inside the courtroom, we watched Parker plead not guilty to all charges. His lawyer, James, looked nervous as he requested bail. When the judge denied it, citing flight risk, I felt Valerie's hand slip into mine. You okay? I whispered. She nodded, squeezing my hand. Better than okay. After the hearing, we gathered in my office for lunch. Monica had ordered celebration sushi, a far cry from the formal family dinners of our childhood. Lucas joined us, sitting closer to me than strictly necessary. The board is thrilled, Monica announced, checking her phone. Our integrity ratings are through the roof. 3 new major clients want to sign with us, and the tech community's calling you a whistleblower hero, Lucas added, grinning at Valerie. Not bad for someone who started in the mailroom. Mom set down her chopsticks. I've been thinking about the company's charity foundation. What about it? I asked cautiously. Well, it needs a director, someone with experience in community relations, who understands the importance of second chances. She straightened her shoulders. I'd like to volunteer. The room went silent. Dad stopped mid-bite, watching for our reaction. You want to work? For me, I clarified. With you, she corrected. Both of you, if you'll have me. Valerie and I exchanged looks. There would be conditions, I said slowly. Professional boundaries, no special treatment. I understand. Mom smiled tentatively. I think it's time I learned to follow someone else's lead. Speaking of following leads, Monica interrupted. Lucas has an announcement. All eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat, looking nervous. The patent office approved our new security protocol, the one Sylvia and I developed together. That's wonderful, Mom exclaimed, then caught herself. I assume that's wonderful. It is, I confirmed, fighting a smile at her effort. It means we can start implementing the changes we've been planning. Changes like making me head of marketing? Valerie asked innocently. You earned that promotion fair and square, Monica pointed out. Your campaign ideas are brilliant. Just like her sister, Dad said proudly, then added, both my daughters making their old man look good. Harold, Mom chided, but she was smiling too. My phone buzzed, a news alert about Parker. His other victims were coming forward, encouraged by our story. The house of cards was truly falling. Remember when you first showed up at my office? I asked Valerie. I thought you were here to destroy me. I thought I was here to save myself, she admitted. Instead, you saved me. We saved each other. That's what family should do, Dad said quietly. We forgot that somewhere along the way. But we're learning, Mom added, reaching for his hand. Together. Lucas's knee bumped mine under the table, deliberately this time. Speaking of together, Sylvia, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? Just us? The old fear flickered. What would my parents think? But Mom was smiling encouragingly, and Dad actually winked. Yes, I said simply. I'd like that. Finally, Monica threw her hands up. I've been watching you two dance around each other for months. As laughter filled the room, I looked around at my family. Old and new, broken and healing. Mom discussing foundation ideas with Monica. Dad and Valerie debating marketing strategies. Lucas's hand finding mine under the table. This wasn't the perfect family I'd dreamed of as a child. It was messy and complicated and real. We had scars and struggles and so much still to work through. But we were trying. Really trying. To new beginnings, Valerie proposed, raising her water glass. To family, Mom added softly. To writing our own rules, I finished. We clinked glasses, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not an ending, we were far from that, but a beginning. A real one, built on truth and acceptance, and the kind of love that grows stronger for having been tested. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's letting go of who you were supposed to be, and becoming who you are instead. Together.
The summer morning in San Diego began earlier than usual. On the 12th floor of the Grande at Santa Fe Place, a luxury condominium in La Jolla, Linda Anderson could see the azure Pacific Ocean from her large windows, a view that had been her pride since her newlywed days. Sunlight streamed into the modern, predominantly white living room. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the yacht harbor was shrouded in morning mist, and early joggers passed by on the promenade. Olivia, you'll be waking up soon, sweetheart. Linda watched her 11-month-old daughter's sleeping face on the baby monitor as she poured water into the electric kettle. At 33, her life seemed to be following the path she'd always dreamed of. She held a position as a senior manager at a major accounting firm, leading her team. And she had a happy home with her loving husband and adorable daughter. With her exceptional numerical sense and calm judgment, Linda had built her career from a young age. She earned her accounting degree from UCSD and passed the challenging CPA exam on her first try. Among her peers, she was known as an exceptionally talented professional who earned her clients' trust. However, behind that peaceful expression, there was always hidden pressure. Another call from Martha. Linda sighed softly at her mother-in-law's name displayed on her smartphone screen. Last night, she had received yet another message expressing concern about the future of children raised by working mothers. Martha's social media was filled daily with posts that seemed to be warnings to modern mothers. It was obvious to everyone that these messages were aimed at Linda. 5 years ago, Linda met John at the tech company where she worked as their accountant. She was instantly captivated by John's sincere character and gentle smile as he worked as a software engineer. They began sharing coffee during breaks and enjoying dinners after work. Those were days when they shared their dreams for the future while watching San Diego sunsets from the office windows. A year later, confident in their mutual respect for each other's careers, they decided to marry. A girl from a family like yours. The words Martha had uttered during their wedding planning still rang in Linda's ears. Linda came from a middle-class family. Her parents were teachers, and she had earned her CPA credentials through scholarships and student loans. She spent her college years studying late into the night at the library and working part-time on weekends. She believed those struggles had shaped who she was today. Martha, on the other hand, grew up in a wealthy family and devoted herself to raising John as a full-time housewife after marriage. Born into an old La Jolla family, she had made her debut as a debutante and married a man from an equally prestigious background. Her upbringing stood in stark contrast to Linda's. Their different values had created a deep divide from the beginning. Weekend family dinners felt like being on trial. Martha constantly criticized Linda's parenting methods, repeatedly starting sentences with, "in my day." She was particularly critical of Linda's decision to use daycare. Olivia's wake-up sounds came through the baby monitor. Linda hurried to her daughter's room. In the bright nursery with pastel pink wallpaper, Olivia was standing in her white crib, reaching out with both hands, a new trick she'd recently learned. "Good morning, my angel." Linda smiled as she lifted her daughter. Touching Olivia's soft cheeks melted away all her worries. Her large brown eyes and adorable smile were just like John's. "Working today?" Linda turned at her husband's voice to find John standing there, running his fingers through his bedhead hair. Seeing him ready for weekend work reminded her of the importance of their mutual support. Before their marriage, John had chosen to marry Linda despite his mother's opposition. She never forgot the weight of that decision. "Yes, but I'll be back in the afternoon. The daycare is closed on weekends, so we'll have to ask Martha to help." John's expression clouded at those words. He too worried about his mother's interference. However, he understood Linda's desire to maintain her career. Their dual income made it possible to afford this luxury apartment and secure Olivia's future education expenses. It was a practical choice. "All right. I'll try to come home early too." Reassured by her husband's words, Linda carried Olivia to the kitchen. While preparing breakfast, she thought about whether there would come a day when she and her mother-in-law could understand each other. In the kitchen equipped with the latest smart home systems, Linda warmed Olivia's organic baby food while mentally organizing today's schedule. Emergency weekend work. Asking her mother-in-law for help. And family time after returning home. Everything was perfectly planned. Outside the window, San Diego was beginning to be bathed in morning light. No one yet knew that this day would become a turning point that would greatly shift those wishes. As the sea breeze gently caressed the glass windows of the high-rise apartment, a new day was about to begin. Café La Rue's red and white striped awning gleamed brilliantly in the morning light. At this point, no one could have predicted that this scene would become the stage for what was about to unfold. At 7 a.m., Linda's smartphone rang. "Mrs. Anderson, I apologize, but we found a serious issue with TechWave's financial statements." Senior partner James Watson's voice lacked its usual composure. A multimillion-dollar discrepancy had been discovered in the quarterly financial report of their major client, TechWave. It needed to be corrected before the stock market opened on Monday. "I understand. I'll head there right away." Linda's hand trembled slightly as she ended the call. Saturday. Weekend childcare facilities required prior day reservations and didn't accept last-minute applications. Her friends were away for the summer vacation season. Babysitting agencies couldn't accommodate such short notice on weekends. There was only one option. "Martha. Good morning. I have an urgent request." A moment of silence on the other end. "Oh, Linda. Work again." Martha's voice carried its usual sarcastic tone. The theme song of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills played in the background. "Career women like you just don't understand the challenges of raising children." "Well, I suppose I'll have to help." Linda swallowed a deep sigh. Arguing wouldn't be wise in this situation. "Please. I'll definitely be back in the afternoon." "All right. But there's a condition." Martha's voice suddenly brightened. "I'll watch her my way. Your modern parenting methods aren't good for Olivia's emotional development." The clock showed 7:30 a.m. Linda rushed to shower and change into a navy pantsuit. As she was putting up her hair, the intercom rang. Perfect hair and makeup, an elegant Chanel tweed jacket. Martha's appearance was impeccable despite the early hour. "Oh, Olivia. Grandmother's angel." Martha lifted her granddaughter and nuzzled her cheek. The gesture seemed calculated, as if for a social media post. Meanwhile, she didn't even glance at Linda. "Olivia's milk is in the refrigerator." "Yes, I know. I raised 3 children myself." Martha gracefully sat on the sofa and took out her smartphone. "In my day, we didn't raise children in such cramped apartments. We had a house with a garden, and I had a maid and 2 nannies to help." Linda nodded silently as she placed a note with Olivia's daily schedule on the kitchen counter. "Her morning snack time and nap time are written here." Such modern schedule management will only spoil children. Martha had already opened Facebook and started drafting a post beginning with, "Young mothers these days." The clock showed 8:15 a.m. Linda quickly kissed Olivia and headed for the elevator. "Thank you for watching her." There was no response. Martha was absorbed in taking selfies with Olivia for her Instagram story. High up in the Grande at Santa Fe Place. On a Saturday morning with forecasts exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Martha Anderson was playing the role of the stylish grandmother against the backdrop of the luxurious view. Likes were accumulating rapidly on her smartphone screen. Behind Martha, who was engrossed in her posts, Olivia was busy practicing her newly learned skill of pulling herself up to stand. On the 12th floor balcony, the wind from the ocean blew like an omen of the tragedy about to unfold. Café La Rue's awning sparkled with vivid blue and white stripes in the morning sun. No one could have known that it would soon become the stage for destiny. At 11:30 a.m., Linda returned to the apartment earlier than planned. As she parked her car, an uneasy feeling crept into her chest. No one was visible on the 12th floor balcony where they should have been visible. In the elevator, Mrs. Thompson, who lived on the same floor, looked at Linda with concern. "Mrs. Anderson, there's been something at your place." While pressing the button for the 12th floor, Linda felt her heartbeat intensifying. The elevator's digital display slowly counted up. 9th floor. 10th floor. 11th floor. Then the 12th floor. When the doors opened, a baby's cry echoed through the hallway, but it was just the sound from a parenting show Martha was watching. "I'm home." As Linda unlocked the smart lock at the entrance, an unusual silence enveloped the apartment. Martha's Hermes Birkin bag sat on the living room sofa, and there was still warm tea on the table. But there was no sign of Olivia, no sight, no sound, no presence. "Martha? Where's Olivia?" Looking around the living room, Linda found Martha standing uneasily by the kitchen counter. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and sweat beaded on her forehead. Her expensive tweed jacket had been cast aside, and her makeup was beginning to smear. "Oh, Linda. You're back already." Martha's voice trembled. Her hand holding the smartphone shook slightly. "Where is Olivia?" At Linda's question, Martha momentarily averted her eyes. "Well, it was hot, so I let her cool off on the balcony." Those words drained the blood from Linda's face. The balcony. The 12th floor balcony where gusts of wind blew through. Linda rushed there at full speed. The familiar pink baby playpen was on the floor. But Olivia wasn't there. "This can't be happening." Martha's scream-like voice echoed behind them. The pale-faced mother-in-law leaned against the balcony railing, staring into empty space. Linda desperately searched the balcony. Inside the playpen was Olivia's favorite stuffed animal. Next to it, Martha's smartphone. The screen showed an unposted Instagram draft. The timestamp was 11:15 a.m. Martha's social media accounts had suddenly gone silent right after that. "The police, we need to call the police." As Linda's trembling hand reached for her smartphone, commotion began to rise from below. The voices were coming from the direction of Café La Rue. Martha collapsed to her knees, unconsciously clawing at her expensive silk blouse. She could no longer play the role of the perfect lady or strike elegant poses for social media. "It's my fault, all my fault." Those words echoed off the high-rise impersonal walls. Linda tried to look down, but the balcony's design created a blind spot directly below. However, the voices were growing louder. Excited voices, surprised voices, and relieved voices. "We need to get downstairs," Linda instinctively shouted. Martha weakly stood up and staggered after her. They both headed for the emergency stairs. There was no time to wait for the elevator. Linda bounded down the stairs, taking 2 or 3 steps at a time. Martha's heels clacked irregularly behind her. At that moment, the scene Linda had seen that morning flashed through her mind. Café La Rue's blue and white striped awning. Just a little further to the first floor. Linda's heart was beating so hard it felt ready to explode. Her hand reached for the emergency exit door. What awaited on the other side? The cheers were definitely getting louder. The moment she opened the door, San Diego's scorching sun blinded them both. Under the blazing sun at ground level, as Linda and Martha burst through the emergency exit door, an astonishing sight met their eyes. At Café La Rue's terrace, a small body slowly sliding down from the blue and white striped awning. And a white-haired woman waiting below with arms wide open. Seconds later, Olivia was safely in the woman's arms. Applause erupted from the customers gathered at the cafe's terrace. Thank goodness, thank goodness. The white-haired woman gently embraced Olivia. She was Carol, a former preschool teacher who now lived nearby and was a regular customer. Next to her, the cafe owner, Tony Moretti, was checking the tension of the awning. The daily maintenance paid off. Tony expressed relief in his Italian-accented English. The commercial-grade latest model awning had cushioned the baby's fall with just the right tension, guiding her safely into Carol's arms. Olivia. Linda rushed to her child and took the baby from Carol. Olivia wasn't crying, rather, she seemed to be enjoying herself. At 11 months old, she didn't seem to understand what she had just experienced. Meanwhile, Martha stood frozen at the scene. Her luxury brand attire and perfect makeup were now disheveled. She could no longer play the role of the stylish grandmother or immerse herself in social media posts. I. As Martha repeated words that wouldn't form, Carol slowly approached her. It's all right, Martha. The baby is safe. At those gentle words, tears began streaming from Martha's eyes. I was so focused on social media, left her alone on the balcony. All eyes turned to Martha. But there was no condemnation in those gazes. Rather, they were looks of sympathy and understanding. Martha. Linda stepped forward, holding Olivia. Is this what you call traditional parenting? Those words were surprisingly gentle. Not anger or blame, but a quiet questioning. Martha's knees gave way, and she sank to the ground. Her pursuit of perfection. Her imprisonment in the ideal grandmother image on social media. Everything was now exposed. This catastrophe was caused by my arrogance. As Martha confessed through tears, Carol stayed by her side. I'm a mother who raised 3 children too. Nobody can be a perfect parent. The surrounding customers nodded at those words. Various generations of mothers had gathered at the terrace seats. What's important is watching over them with love. Maria, Tony's wife, brought warm coffee. She too had raised 4 children. And sometimes, it's important to ask for help. At Carol's words, Martha slowly raised her face. Linda. I'm truly sorry. I was wrong. She continued with a trembling voice. For constantly criticizing your parenting methods. I'm so sorry. Linda crouched down in front of Martha while holding Olivia. From now on, let's try to understand each other. Just then, sirens approached. The ambulance and police that someone had called were arriving. However, there was no longer any emergency. It was the community's bonds that saved this child. The gathered people quietly agreed with Carol's words. 1 month later, on a Saturday, at Café La Rue's terrace, the regular customers were relaxing as usual. A new scene unfolded under the blue and white striped awning. Olivia, look, copy Grandma. Martha was teaching her granddaughter how to eat Italian gelato. Next to them, Carol watched warmly while knitting. How's my special tiramisu? Maria brought over a new dessert creation. She had recently begun teaching Martha authentic Italian home cooking. Linda and her husband John watched the scene together. Martha's smartphone was no longer for social media posts but for recording Olivia's growth. Would you like more coffee? Tony offered his usual blend. He had recently become a member of the building's safety management committee and had begun working on improving the apartment's childcare environment. Thank you, Tony. Weekend brunch had become a new family tradition. The aroma of barista-brewed coffee, freshly baked croissants, and the fresh breeze from the ocean. Hey, Linda. Martha called out with an unusually serious expression. I'm thinking of studying early childhood education at the community college. Linda smiled gently at those words. The awning still swayed gently in the breeze today. What was once the stage of tragedy had become a place for deepening family bonds. Under San Diego's sunlight, a new story was quietly beginning to unfold. On the terrace overlooking La Jolla's cityscape, understanding and love across generations were truly taking root. Martha's transformation was a small miracle born from the warmth of those around her. And just like the awning that day, they would continue walking forward, supporting each other through new days ahead. Now then, I made today's lunch myself, Martha announced proudly. There was no longer any pretense or vanity there. Only pure love for her family gently radiated through. The rocking chair on the porch swayed gently in the autumn breeze. A dried leaf fell silently from the hydrangea bushes. Elizabeth Miller let out a deep sigh as she gazed across her well-maintained front yard. The season of fall colors was approaching once again. I should move the rosemary indoors soon. Adjusting the collar of her light cardigan that wrapped around her petite frame, Elizabeth glanced toward the corner of the garden. The herbs that her husband Thomas had planted 3 years ago were now flourishing. Since his sudden passing from a heart attack, these morning hours spent in the rocking chair had become her daily ritual. At 62, Elizabeth still took pride in her appearance. Her neatly cut short hair, subtle makeup, and elegant J.Crew attire reflected this care. The meticulousness she had developed as a former accountant naturally carried over into her retired life. Back in the living room, the warm morning sunlight illuminated the family photos on the shelf. Her daughter Rachel's smiling face, and next to her, her granddaughter Emily looking cheerful. The two in the photographs looked so happy, and yet Rachel's weekly phone calls lately had seemed somewhat lackluster. Even when she spoke about everyday events in her usual bright voice, there seemed to be a lack of energy. And over the past 2 months, the frequency of calls had noticeably decreased. Call it a mother's intuition. Elizabeth wondered if she was being overly concerned. She had always avoided interfering too much in her daughter's family life. That was a lesson learned from her own relationship with her mother. the twice-monthly visits were still the highlights of her life. Especially the time spent with her 5-year-old granddaughter Emily brought her incomparable joy. Grandma. Emily would always rush into her arms the moment the door opened. She would show off moves learned in ballet class or play her new piano pieces. Her innocent smile filled Elizabeth's heart with warmth. However, something had been bothering her lately. During a recent iPad video call, Emily had let slip the words, "Daddy's scary." The little girl's expression at that moment haunted Elizabeth's thoughts. Her son-in-law James had initially seemed like an ideal match. After graduating from Boston University, he had built a successful career at a local real estate company, and his devotion to Rachel had been impressive. 5 years into their marriage, they had purchased a home in a new development and appeared to have built a happy family. Lately, though, James had rarely been present during her visits. Rachel would say, "He's busy with work," but Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that something else lay behind those words. During lunch at Whole Foods with her book club friends, someone brought up rumors about James. They'd spotted him at a local bar. Elizabeth had quickly changed the subject to avoid further speculation. "All I can do is watch over them." Her close friend Martha from the church reading group had said, "You're worrying too much." Perhaps she was right. At dusk, Elizabeth smoothly pulled her compact SUV into the parking spot. It had become her recent habit to return home before the Instacart grocery delivery arrived. Since living alone, she had made an effort to maintain a regular routine. As she unlocked the front door, she recalled her weekend plans. Saturday would be spent with her daughter's family after church as usual. They had plans to attend Emily's new ballet recital, which the little girl was looking forward to. As night fell, Elizabeth gently touched the family photo in the living room as part of her bedtime routine. In the photo, Rachel wore the happy smile of a newlywed. It pained Elizabeth to think that the sparkle from those days seemed to be gradually fading. "Surely I'm just being paranoid." She told herself this as she headed to her bedroom. Yet her maternal instinct seemed to be warning her that something serious was approaching. Bedtime was drawing near. Elizabeth was going through her usual evening routine in the night's stillness. The bedroom lights were dimmed, with only the warm glow of the nightstand lamp illuminating the room. A cold October breeze slipped through a gap in the curtains. Usually, this was when she would drift peacefully to sleep, but tonight she felt unsettled. Earlier in the day, she had tried calling Rachel but couldn't get through. While this wasn't unusual lately, something felt off. Elizabeth sat on the bed, reviewing her call history. Her current book lay by her pillow, the next assignment for her book club. The clock showed 11:15 p.m. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she had promised to attend Emily's ballet recital. She smiled, remembering how proudly the little girl had talked about her new tutu, and how excited she was for her grandmother to come. The notification light on her smartphone blinked blue on the nightstand. Probably a delivery confirmation from Amazon. Just as she reached to check it, her bedside iPad screen suddenly lit up brightly. The ringtone pierced the night's silence. The display showed Emily, and Elizabeth hesitated for a moment. A video call from her granddaughter at this late hour. Something felt wrong. "Emily. What's wrong, calling so late?" The moment she swiped to answer, Elizabeth's heart froze. The screen showed Emily's face, distorted with tears. Her usually adorable expression was gone, her eyes were swollen, and her cheeks were wet with tears. Her small face appeared pale in the darkness. Her hair was disheveled, and her pajama collar was askew. "Grandma." A trembling voice leaked from the speaker. It contained a fear Elizabeth had never heard before. "Daddy. Daddy's yelling at Mommy. Help. I'm scared." In the background, she could faintly hear angry shouting. A man's harsh voice she'd never heard before. And mixed with it, a woman's crying. She thought she heard something fall over. Elizabeth's hands shook. On the screen, her granddaughter's shoulders trembled slightly. Emily seemed to be hiding somewhere in the darkness. "Emily, where are you now? Is Mommy with you?" She tried desperately to maintain her composure, but her voice rose. Various possibilities raced through her mind. James, that once quiet son-in-law, why? "I don't know. It's dark." The little girl's voice cut off. There was the sound of a door opening in the background. Then suddenly, the screen went dark. The call had ended. "Emily. Emily." She frantically redialed, but there was no answer. She tried Rachel's cell phone next. The call tone rang emptily. Once, twice, 3 times, switching to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Cold sweat ran down her spine. Stay calm, Elizabeth." Telling herself this, she sprang into action. She threw on a navy coat over her nightgown, stuffed her wallet and smartphone into her bag. No time to check her makeup-free face in the mirror. She grabbed her car keys at the entrance while rushing down the stairs. Outside, the cold night air struck her cheeks. Streetlights cast shadows of the beginning fall foliage onto the sidewalk. The night's silence, usually calming, now felt eerie. The sound of the garage door opening echoed through the quiet residential area. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The clock showed 11:35 p.m. Usually a 20-minute drive to her daughter's house. No traffic at this hour. Her foot on the accelerator trembled slightly. The seatbelt felt unusually cold against her. Her compact SUV silently cruised through the dark suburban streets. Streetlights regularly pierced the car's interior before fading away. With each flash, Elizabeth's anxiety deepened. When traffic lights turned red, frustration welled up inside her. Please, be safe. Even while waiting for lights to turn green, she checked her phone screen. But there were no calls, no messages, nothing. Her own face reflected in the dark screen seemed pale. At 11:55 p.m., she finally arrived at the new development where Rachel's house stood. The familiar white-walled building loomed faintly in the moonlight. But all the windows were dark. Usually, a small light would be visible in the upstairs children's room at this hour. After parking, only silence greeted her ears as the engine died. She rushed to the entrance and pressed the doorbell. The shrill sound vanished uselessly into the night sky. No response. The entrance was firmly locked. "Rachel. Emily. Is anyone there?" Her shouts went unanswered. Circling the house, she found no sign of James's car. The neighboring houses had lights on, but their curtains were drawn. No sign that anyone had noticed. Elizabeth's heart pounded. What had just happened in this dark house? And now, where were her daughter and granddaughter? Anxiety enveloped her with the cold night wind. She took out her smartphone again and dialed Rachel's number. The call tone rang emptily before switching to voicemail. Trying desperately to steady her shaking voice, she left a message. "Rachel, it's me. I got a call from Emily. I'm in front of your house now. Please call me back right away. Please." Looking up at the building that seemed abandoned in the moonlight, Elizabeth let out a deep sigh. Her reflection wavered uncertainly in the window glass. Even now, at this moment, her daughter and granddaughter might need help somewhere. But in this darkness, there seemed nothing she could do. In the midnight residential area, Elizabeth dialed 911. The dial tone rang ominously in the darkness. 911, emergency response. A calm female operator's voice came through. "My granddaughter called." Struggling to control her trembling voice, Elizabeth explained the situation. The video call from her 5-year-old granddaughter, the angry shouting in the background, the sudden call disconnection. And now the dark house. "Do you know your family's current whereabouts?" "No. Neither my daughter nor son-in-law are answering their phones." After a pause, the operator continued. "No direct violence has been confirmed at this point, correct?" "No, but please monitor the situation for 24 hours. In cases of adult disappearance, we can't immediately." The procedural words rang coldly in her ears. Elizabeth stood in front of the dark house, still clutching her phone. "I can't just wait." She gripped the steering wheel again. Slowly drove down the street illuminated by streetlights. There was a park in this new development where children played. A place with Emily's favorite playground equipment. Maybe. The park was eerily quiet in the moonlight. A swing creaked softly in the wind. The car's headlights illuminated the playground equipment, but there was no sign of anyone. "Rachel, where are you?" She picked up her smartphone again. Left another message on voicemail. "How many times now?" Her voice was growing hoarse. She parked at a 24-hour CVS. The fluorescent lights inside cast an unnaturally bright glow around. At the entrance, a sleepy clerk was organizing newspapers. "Excuse me." Elizabeth showed a photo from her wallet. Rachel and Emily's smiling faces from last month's birthday. "Have you seen these two?" The clerk shook his head. "Sorry, ma'am." Next was the Starbucks near Whole Foods, where Rachel often went. But it was already closed. Her reflection in the window glass looked somehow aged. The clock had passed 1 a.m. Her phone's battery level sparked new anxiety. She'd left the charger at home. She checked each street in the residential area. Dim lights leaked from the windows of unfamiliar houses. Wouldn't someone notice? Hadn't anyone seen them? Fatigue was setting in. Her limbs felt heavy, and her vision was starting to blur. Further searching might be dangerous. Just as she thought this, something clicked. Could it be home? Yes, they might be heading to her house. Since childhood, Rachel had always returned home when troubled. Elementary school fights, high school heartbreaks, college setbacks. She had shed tears in this mother's house through it all. She turned around. The familiar route felt strangely long tonight. The bands of light and shadow created by streetlights stretched on like a nightmare. 2 a.m. Finally entering her own neighborhood. From a distance, she could make out the outline of her house. And then, under the porch light, two shadows. A woman embracing a small child. Rachel. Emily. Her voice wouldn't come. Tears blurred her vision. She quickly parked and cut the engine. Got out on shaking legs. Mom. Rachel's voice broke the night's silence. Emily was asleep in her mother's arms. Traces of tears still marked her cheeks. I'm sorry. I couldn't answer the phone. Cutting off her words, Elizabeth embraced them both. Warmth returned to their cold bodies. The porch light cast their long shadows on the ground. She couldn't ask anything yet. Couldn't say anything. For now, just holding them was enough. All explanations could wait. Right now, she just wanted to savor this moment of relief. In the moonlight, the shadows of 3 generations of women merged into one. The cold night wind gently enveloped them. Steam rose from 3 mugs on the living room table. The warm scent of chamomile tea gradually eased the night's tension. Emily was finally sleeping peacefully in her old room upstairs. The wall clock pointed to 3 a.m. Can you talk? Elizabeth gently placed her hand on Rachel's shoulder as she sank into the sofa. Her daughter nodded slightly, wrapping her cold hands around the mug. Her fingertips were still trembling faintly. James recently made a big mistake at work. Rachel's voice was hoarse. He had lost a major real estate contract, and his sales numbers had plummeted dramatically. The Boston real estate market's downturn was more severe than expected, with new construction sales stagnating. Pressure from the company mounted daily, and their finances gradually tightened. But that happens to everyone, doesn't it? Yet Rachel's words caught in her throat as tears welled up again. James had started stopping by local bars every night. At first, he said it was for work socializing, but gradually he began drinking alone. As he came home later and later, reeking of alcohol, Emily grew increasingly afraid of her father. Tonight was particularly bad. After a major corporate deal negotiation had fallen through beyond repair, James had come home drunk. From the moment he opened the door, his shouting began. You're holding me back. What good is a stay-at-home mom, even this house's mortgage? Words that were once filled with love had been twisted by alcohol into verbal abuse. I knew I had to protect Emily. Rachel continued with a trembling voice. When James drunkenly threw a vase to the floor, Emily ran to her room. Taking advantage of that moment, Rachel quietly packed a bag with essentials for her daughter. Pajamas, change of clothes, and Emily's precious teddy bear. James had the car keys, but I thought we could walk to Mom's house. They desperately started walking through the residential area at night. Emily silently held her mother's hand, occasionally looking back as they walked. Following moonlit streets with few streetlights. about a 40-minute walk to her mother's house. The cold bit into them. But Emily wanted to call Grandma. When they stopped in the darkness, her daughter took out the iPad. Rachel felt tears well up at Emily's words, "Grandma will help us." However, when they heard James's car engine during the call, they had to quickly end it. "We walked desperately from there, but we must have passed by Mom's car." They hid in the shadows of tree-lined streets several times as cars passed by. Later, they realized one of them had been her mother's car. The two of them, desperately focused on walking forward, hadn't seen who was in the car. "James." Rachel's words trailed off. Elizabeth's smartphone vibrated. An unknown number appeared on the screen. "Hello? Mrs. Miller. This is Officer Johnson from Newton Police." The officer's voice echoed in the quiet living room. James's car had been found in a local bar's parking lot. He was heavily intoxicated inside, and the staff had called the police. "We have him in custody now. Planning to hold him until morning." Elizabeth let out a deep sigh. "Thank you," she said and hung up. "James." Rachel's voice trembled. "I can't go back. Tomorrow, no, today, I'm calling a lawyer right away. First, we'll get a restraining order." "Mom. It's okay now. I'll protect you and Emily, absolutely. This isn't just temporary shelter. We'll follow proper procedures and start a new life." The sun was beginning to rise. Soft light streaming through the window announced the start of a new day. Elizabeth stood up and opened the curtains. The hydrangeas in the front yard sparkled with morning dew. "I'm thinking of looking for part-time work." Rachel's voice carried determination. "Emily's school fees will be needed. Let's think about it slowly here. We have plenty of time." Upstairs, Emily's peaceful breathing could be heard. In what was once Rachel's room, her granddaughter now slept soundly. "Thank you, Mom." Strength was gradually returning to Rachel's voice. Indeed, this wasn't the end. It might be the beginning of new challenges. Divorce proceedings, custody issues, financial independence. Many hurdles lay ahead. But they weren't alone anymore. Elizabeth picked up the family photo on the table. An old picture with James smiling. Back then, no one could have predicted this outcome. But life sometimes takes unexpected turns. What matters is the choices we make from there. As the morning sun gently began to illuminate the room, mother and daughter sat quietly together. The clock hands pointed to the start of a new day. And those hands had surely begun marking the first steps toward a new life. 6 months later, on a spring afternoon, new roses were beginning to bloom in Elizabeth's garden. It was a pink variety that Emily had chosen, named Hope. "Grandma, look. There are more buds." Weekend afternoons had become Emily's routine time to help with the garden. At kindergarten, she proudly reported on the growth of the morning glories she was raising. The custody hearings in court had proceeded more smoothly than expected. James's drunk driving record and documentation of that violent night had been decisive. Rachel was granted custody, with James given monthly visitation rights. However, the first 6 months required supervised visits. James had started attending an alcoholism treatment program following that night's events. weekly counseling and regular AA meetings. At least he's trying to change, Rachel had quietly remarked. Elizabeth's house had now become home to 3 generations of women. The upstairs guest room became Rachel's room, and her former childhood room became Emily's space. 3 place settings appeared at the breakfast table, and 3 laughing voices echoed at twilight. Rachel had started a part-time job at a local accounting firm, secured through Elizabeth's former connections as an accountant. I grew up watching Mom's example, Rachel smiled. She was gradually walking the path toward financial independence. During divorce mediation, the issue of house disposal came up. Eventually, after renegotiating with the bank, James took over the mortgage on their new home. In exchange, Rachel secured an increase in child support. "Mom, I got the lead role in the ballet recital." One day, Emily excitedly announced after returning from school. "I told Dad I want him to come see it." The room's atmosphere froze for a moment at those words. But Rachel gently stroked her daughter's head and replied, "Yes. Grandma and I will go watch too." In fact, James was changing bit by bit. He earnestly continued his sobriety program, and progress was visible in his counseling. During visits, he was beginning to show glimpses of the gentle father he once was. While complete restoration might be difficult, a new form of relationship was beginning to take shape. "People can change, can't they?" Elizabeth whispered to her daughter one night. "But just waiting isn't enough. You have to decide to change yourself." Rachel's response carried the strength of experience. The spring breeze carried the scent of new buds. The roses in the garden continued to produce more buds. The 3 women were each walking their new life paths in their own way. Sometimes through tears, but always moving forward. This house now embraced a new form of family. Perhaps not a perfect form. But it had become a place bound by genuine bonds of love and understanding. "Looks like tomorrow will be nice weather too," Elizabeth murmured, looking up at the twilight sky. "Yes, surely it will be." Rachel's voice echoed softly. Outside the window, Emily was watering the roses in the garden. Her figure, glowing in the sunset, seemed like a symbol of hope. I've been working in the children's section of the library for 7 years now. Wednesday's story time is still my favorite part of the week. Every time I see the children's eyes light up, I know I made the right career choice. "Hey, Miss Grace. What story are you going to read next?" When the children ask me this, I respond with a gentle smile. There's always a warm atmosphere in the children's corner of Cambridge Public Library. I love this place, where the scent of old wood mingles with the smell of new books. My colleagues describe me as patient. Indeed, my ability to maintain a smile all day while dealing with energetic children might be part of my natural disposition. But it's not an act at all. The time I spend with the children brings me pure joy. My name is Grace Anderson, and I'm 34 years old. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with my husband Daniel and our 6-year-old son Noah. People call me a modest beauty. True, my slim figure and refined features might be traits inherited from my mother. However, I consider my ability to treat everyone equally, without discrimination, to be my greatest strength. Our house is in a quiet residential area, about a 10-minute drive from Harvard University. The gray two-story home is so well maintained it's hard to believe it's 10 years old. The large maple tree in front of our entrance changes its expression with each season, delighting us with pale green leaves in spring and blazing red foliage in autumn. From our large living room window, we can see neighborhood children playing. This area has wonderful community spirit. Our next-door neighbors, the Johnsons, are retired teachers who dote on Noah as if he were their own grandson. The Rodriguez family across the street has children the same age as ours, and they often play together. In our backyard, we have a permanent barbecue set that Daniel maintains on his days off. Weekend barbecue parties with neighborhood families have become a tradition. A white picket fence gently encircles the yard, watching over these gatherings. The lawn is always perfectly maintained, with tulips blooming in spring and lavender flourishing in summer. I'm home. Just after 5:30 in the evening, Noah returns from school with an energetic voice. He's a first grader at the public elementary school, an active boy who excels in math and science. He belongs to the local Little League baseball team and eagerly looks forward to weekend practice. In his baseball uniform, he looks like a tiny major leaguer. He's well liked by his teammates and always wears a smile. Mom, guess what? I got a perfect score on my math test today. Noah's cheeks flush with joy. His pure smile always warms my heart. He always starts his homework right after dinner and tries hard to write neatly. His conscientious side makes us proud as parents. Around 7 p.m., Daniel returns home. He works as a project manager at Microsoft, having steadily built his career after graduating from Stanford Graduate School. Thanks to his comfortable annual income of $150,000, we're able to maintain a stable lifestyle. Daniel's work ethic is highly regarded by his colleagues. Although he sometimes works late when project deadlines approach, he never fails to prioritize family time. He always attends Noah's baseball games on weekends and makes time for us. Sorry I'm late again today. When Daniel comes home saying this, his expression always shows a mixture of slight remorse and abundant love. He deeply respects his parents and brother and values family above all else. Even when he's troubled by work issues, he tries not to show his anxiety to the family. Daniel and I met 8 years ago at Stanford Graduate School. I had come to California to study library science. We happened to sit next to each other in a general education class, and that was our first encounter. It was early September, at the beginning of the fall semester, and I still vividly remember meeting him in the soft sunlight streaming through the window. Do you like books? That was our first conversation during a break, when he showed interest in the book I was reading. We began having study dates at the library, and naturally, our relationship evolved into romance. I gradually fell for his sincere personality and intellectual conversation. After dating for a year, we decided to get married. The proposal happened at Stanford University's library. In the courtyard visible from the classroom where we first met, Daniel nervously presented me with a ring. I clearly remember meeting my in-laws for the first time at our wedding. My parents-in-law were passionate about education, particularly my mother-in-law Elizabeth, who had served as principal of a private high school. She was strict yet warm-hearted and welcomed me like her own daughter. My brother-in-law Matthew worked at a local bank and had a serious personality, while his wife Rebecca was cheerful by nature. I made a commitment to cherish my relationship with this new family. I never miss our monthly family dinners and always make sure to choose thoughtful gifts for my in-laws' birthdays and anniversaries. I especially enjoy conversations with my mother-in-law about education, which bring me great joy. We were living happily in these peaceful days, finding joy in daily small events and overcoming minor worries together. I believed this life would continue forever. The aroma of dinner wafting from the kitchen, the sound of family laughter in the living room, Noah's peaceful breathing from his bedroom, all these were my treasures. Until that day came. The first Sunday of each month is the Anderson family dinner day. Today, as usual, our family and my brother-in-law's family are gathered at my in-laws' spacious mansion. Entering through the front door, we're greeted by an elegant living room decorated in white. On the walls hang commendations from when my father-in-law Robert worked as a cardiac surgeon, and photographs from the high school where my mother-in-law Elizabeth served as principal. Below these are photos of Matthew and Daniel from their student days. Looking at the brothers' pictures side by side, they share similar gentle expressions, yet somehow give different impressions. My brother-in-law Matthew works as a deputy branch manager at a local bank. His serious and reserved personality is considered ideal for a banker by those around him. "Hey, Grace. Thanks for coming today." Matthew's expression is always calm when he greets me. However, I sense something dark lurking behind his eyes. This darkness seems to intensify especially when Daniel talks about his promotions at Microsoft. On the other hand, Matthew's wife Rebecca is like sunshine personified. While being a full-time housewife raising 2 children, she also runs a small tutoring class from home. I hear she teaches English to neighborhood children, and her reputation is excellent. "Grace, I tried a new recipe today. Let me know what you think later." Rebecca's cheerful voice echoes through the room. Her sociable personality seems to complement Matthew's introverted nature. My brother-in-law's children, 10-year-old Emily and 8-year-old Jason, often play with Noah. Emily has inherited her mother's bright personality and takes classical ballet lessons. Jason has his father's cautious nature but rivals Noah in baseball, pushing each other to improve. "Noah, let's play over there." "Yay! I'll show you my new baseball cards." While the children's energetic voices ring out, my father-in-law Robert sits in his usual armchair, drinking coffee. A former cardiac surgeon at Boston General Hospital, he still works as a part-time physician twice a week after retirement. This attitude sometimes seems less like passion for medicine and more like an attachment to social status. "Daniel, how's work going? Any progress on that new project you mentioned?" My father-in-law's voice carries a mixture of expectation and pride. Everyone in the family must notice his special affection for his second son, Daniel. He takes genuine pride in his son who graduated from Stanford Graduate School and achieved success in the IT industry. Beside him, my mother-in-law Elizabeth subtly keeps an eye on Matthew. As a former private high school principal with deep insight into education, she's a gentle yet strong-willed woman. "Matthew, how are things at the bank? I hear the economy is gradually improving." Mother-in-law's question reveals her maternal concern for her eldest son's financial situation. She seems worried about the economic disparity that has developed between her 2 sons. The food on the table is always prepared jointly by my mother-in-law and Rebecca. Traditional roast beef with seasonal vegetables, these warm, home-cooked meals have become part of the Anderson family memories. Everyone, let's eat. At my mother-in-law's call, the whole family gathers around the dining table. The silverware gleaming against the white tablecloth represents the family's pride, passed down through generations. On the surface, it's a picture of perfect family harmony. However, the occasional glances and emotions hidden in words suggest something more complex. Particularly Matthew's reserved attitude seems to stem from something deeper than just his personality. "Brother, I heard your recent proposal was well received." Daniel reaches out to his brother with care in his voice. Matthew responds with just a faint smile. His expression reveals complicated feelings toward his younger brother. Family dinners always last about 3 hours. Before we leave, mother-in-law never fails to confirm next month's plans. It's not just a habit, but rather a ritual to affirm family bonds. "See you next month. Please take care." We nod at mother-in-law's words as we leave. As we get into the car, I thought I caught a glimpse of my brother-in-law's vacant expression in the rearview mirror. Surely, it was just my imagination. At least, that's what I chose to believe at the time. On a mild Saturday in May, our backyard was bustling from early morning. Today is Noah's 6th birthday party. I had been checking the weather forecast frequently since the day before, and fortunately, the sky is clear. "Shall we put the balloons here?" Rebecca suggests, holding blue and white helium balloons. She had been helping with decorations since the previous day. Under the white party tent, blue tablecloths are already laid out, adorned with sparkling star decorations. "Yes, that's perfect. They're Noah's favorite colors." As I respond, Rebecca calls Emily and Jason to help arrange the balloons. The children run around happily, helping to decorate the yard. Surprisingly, Matthew seems the most enthusiastic. He volunteered to arrange the cake this time. My usually reserved brother-in-law had specially ordered a cake from a renowned patisserie in the city, saying, "It's a special day. Don't worry. I'll take responsibility for getting the perfect cake." I was truly grateful for those words. It was rare to see my usually reserved brother-in-law so proactive. Surely it came from a genuine desire to celebrate his nephew's birthday. Daniel was in charge of setting up the yard. With his meticulous personality, he checked everything from the safety of play equipment to preparing the barbecue grill. I was in the kitchen preparing finger foods that I knew the children would enjoy. We invited about 30 guests, family members, Noah's school friends and their families, and close neighbors. Since moving to this neighborhood, we've maintained excellent relationships with our neighbors, who gladly accepted our party invitation. "Mom, are my friends coming soon?" Throughout the morning, Noah keeps asking excitedly. Dressed in his new baseball uniform, his eyes sparkle with the joy of celebrating his birthday. At 2 p.m., the first guests arrive. My in-laws, Robert and Elizabeth, appear more dressed up than usual. Especially my mother-in-law seems genuinely excited about her grandson's birthday. "Happy birthday, Noah. This is a special present from Grandma." The package my mother-in-law presents contains a high-end telescope. Noah's eyes light up, he loves science. As more guests arrive, the backyard fills with laughter. Children play on the equipment while adults chat under the party tent. Several of my library colleagues have come too, creating circles of pleasant conversation. Everyone, please gather around. It's cake time. At 3 p.m., Matthew proudly brings out the cake. The three-tiered masterpiece is designed with a baseball theme, beautifully decorated with deep blue icing and white stars. Wow, amazing! The children cheer. Noah is particularly excited, his eyes shining. Happy birthday to you! As everyone joins in singing, Noah beams with happiness while the candle flames flicker in the breeze. I wished this moment could last forever. Everyone applauds warmly as Noah blows out the candles. Matthew cuts the cake, with the first piece naturally going to Noah. Looks delicious. Noah happily takes his first bite. That's when it happened. Huh. With a faint sound, Noah's expression suddenly clouds over. The next moment, he collapses. Noah! My scream echoes through the yard. Foam starts coming from my son's mouth, and his whole body begins convulsing violently. Screams erupt from the crowd, and the party instantly descends into chaos. An ambulance! Someone call an ambulance! Daniel shouts desperately. My father-in-law Robert immediately rushes to Noah's side, beginning emergency treatment with a doctor's calm judgment. He's conscious. But this is... My father-in-law's expression grows severe. I could only hold my son's hand with trembling fingers. Someone calls an ambulance, and sirens approach. As party decorations sway in the wind, my son continues to breathe with difficulty. I never imagined this special day would end like this. My mind went blank, and all I could do was keep calling my son's name. Noah! Noah! With sirens wailing, we headed to Boston Children's Hospital. In the back seat, holding Noah's hand tightly, I prayed desperately. Through tear-blurred eyes, I watched the paramedics administering medical treatment. Seizures continuing. Consciousness level dropping. My heart constricts at each call from the paramedics. Upon reaching the hospital, Noah is immediately rushed to the emergency room. The sound of the stretcher racing down the white hallway still echoes in my ears. Daniel fills out necessary paperwork, occasionally looking up at the ceiling with deep sighs. Noah, hang in there. As I whisper these words outside the treatment room, my father-in-law Robert quietly responds. I used to work at this hospital. They have the best medical team. Let's trust them and wait. Though his words carried strength, even the former cardiac surgeon's face showed unusual concern. Family members gather at the hospital one after another. My mother-in-law Elizabeth embraces my shoulders, while Rebecca sits quietly in a corner of the waiting room with Emily and Jason. And Matthew, only he seems restless, pacing back and forth across the waiting room. Mrs. Anderson. A young resident approaches us. A stethoscope peeks out from his white coat pocket. We have the initial test results. Dr. Thompson, the chief of emergency, will explain in detail. Please come to the treatment room. At these words, Daniel and I exchange glances. During the hours of emergency testing, none of us had spoken a word. The clock hands seemed to move unnaturally slowly. Around 8 p.m., Dr. Thompson enters the room with the test results. His name tag gleams under the fluorescent lights. He appears to be in his mid-50s, an experienced physician. His quiet demeanor conveys the tension of someone about to deliver serious news. Dr. Thompson slowly takes a seat. His movements suggest the weight of what he's about to say. Mrs. Anderson. He looks straight into my eyes and presents a test result. His hand appears to tremble slightly. Do you understand what this shows? The doctor's voice echoes in the quiet room. The test result paper shows complex graphs and numbers. My hands shake. Please look at this area marked in red. The section Dr. Thompson points to shows numbers that shouldn't be possible. These are the results of toxicology tests. His words send chills down my spine. We found large amounts of psychotropic drugs in your son's blood. This concentration. The doctor pauses for a moment, choosing his words carefully, then continues, cannot be explained by accident. I'm sorry, but under these circumstances, we must notify the police. At that moment, my knees give way. Daniel leans against the wall, covering his face with both hands. Events moved rapidly after that. Police arrived at the hospital and began their investigation. A room in the severe pediatric ward suddenly became the center of an investigation. Home security camera footage was reviewed, and all party attendees were interviewed. The cake's production process was particularly scrutinized. Every step from ordering at the patisserie to delivery was thoroughly investigated. Then, they began tracking how the drugs were obtained. Veteran Detective Johnson led the investigation. His sharp gaze suggested he had grasped something important. 3 days after the incident, a shocking truth came to light. Matthew Anderson, you are under arrest. The police officer's voice echoes through the hospital hallway. My brother-in-law was arrested as a suspect in the attempted murder of his own nephew. During interrogation, the whole truth emerged. Deep-rooted jealousy toward his brother since childhood. State University versus Stanford, $70,000 versus $150,000 income difference. The disparity in parental affection. Everything had eaten away at his heart. Furthermore, the existence of $500,000 in debt came to light. Liabilities from failed real estate investments. Persistent harassment from debt collectors. Backed into a corner, he made his final, devastating choice. And most shocking was his confession of twisted feelings toward me. From the moment I met Grace at my brother's wedding. In the interrogation room, Matthew kept talking with his head down. My perfect brother got a perfect wife too. I couldn't stand it. Why did Grace, who was kind to everyone, become my brother's wife? At these words, I covered my mouth with trembling hands. I hadn't noticed. Or perhaps I hadn't wanted to notice. My life was always in my brother's shadow. This time, I thought I could finally take something from him. Matthew's final words echoed in the freezing silence. Outside the interrogation room, our family was speechless. Rebecca collapsed to the floor, my mother-in-law silently watched her son, and my father-in-law wiped away tears I'd never seen before. And beside me, Daniel just stared into space. He seemed unable to accept the fact that the brother he had respected since childhood had tried to kill his son. Matthew's trial concluded on a mild spring day. A sentence of 15 years in prison. Our family quietly listened as the verdict was read in court. After the verdict, my father-in-law Robert bowed deeply. The way we treated our sons differently, this result is our responsibility as parents. My mother-in-law Elizabeth nodded slightly at these words. Deep regret showed in both their eyes. Noah's recovery exceeded the doctor's expectations. He was discharged a month after the incident and returned to school 2 months later. Now, no trace of that day's events remains in his smile. Perhaps Daniel suffered the deepest wounds. His beloved brother's betrayal left a great void in his heart. However, his relationship with his parents has grown even deeper than before. Son, let's talk about all the things we never noticed before. Daniel silently nodded at his father's words. It was the beginning of a new parent-child relationship. Maintaining our relationship with Rebecca and her children was our strong desire. Emily and Jason remain as close as ever with their cousin Noah. If anything, their bond seems to have deepened. Grace, I'm truly grateful to have you. I squeezed Rebecca's hand tightly in response to her words. She must be carrying perhaps the deepest pain of all. As we reconsidered what family means, we wove new bonds. Monthly family dinners became occasions for more honest dialogue. My in-laws now treasure their time with their grandchildren above all else, and the children seem to sense this change keenly. Hey, Grace. One day, Daniel spoke to me quietly. I can never forgive my brother. But I think we can create a new kind of family. I nodded silently at his words. Indeed, we can never return to our previous relationship. But perhaps through this ordeal, we learned the true meaning of family. The tragedy of that day will never disappear. Still, we continue walking forward, carrying our wounds. Sometimes we pause and sigh deeply. But each time, someone in the family gently places a hand on our shoulder. I think this is the shape of our family now. 5 years have passed, and we still live in our Cambridge home. The maple tree in the backyard has grown larger, its branches creating richer shade than before. Noah is 11 now. He's the ace pitcher on his middle school baseball team and recently won the district championship. After the game, he ran to us with a beaming smile. My in-laws and Rebecca were among the spectators watching over him. Emily and Jason are growing up well too. Emily is preparing for high school, and Jason won a prize at the regional science fair. The children seem to have grown stronger by overcoming that incident. Daniel recently established a nonprofit organization for IT education. He started teaching programming to underprivileged children. His words, "Everyone should have equal opportunities," carry deep meaning. My father-in-law Robert has fully retired and now volunteers in community healthcare. My mother-in-law Elizabeth works as an education counselor, supporting families with problems. Perhaps they are walking a path of atonement by giving back to society through their experiences. Rebecca earned professional counseling credentials and now works helping families repair their relationships. Her kindness has become a support for many families carrying similar pain. As for me, I started a reading program at the library themed around family bonds. I wanted to create a space where we could think about family relationships through books. I still think about Matthew sometimes. I hear he's participating in rehabilitation programs and receiving psychological counseling in prison. We can't forgive him, but we're no longer trapped by hatred. Maybe that's what we learned from this ordeal. Sometimes, standing in the backyard at dusk, I remember that day. But now, even those memories can be accepted as experiences that have made us stronger. Life sometimes presents us with cruel trials. But through these trials, we learn the true meaning of family. Perfect families don't exist. What's important is acknowledging each other's imperfections and supporting one another as we walk forward. Now, a new season's wind blows outside. The maple leaves sway gently. On a February afternoon, with freezing wind biting my cheeks, I was driving home for the first time in 6 weeks from my parents' house. In the back seat, 2-week-old Sophia slept peacefully, her tiny head nestled in a special cushion. She looked like an angel in her car seat. With David's blue eyes, my daughter was a precious reminder of my absent husband. Looking at myself in the driver's mirror, I could still see the fatigue of childbirth on my face. My light brown hair looked a bit worn, and there were faint shadows under my eyes. Yet, I was filled with an unprecedented sense of happiness. In my 35 years of life, I had never felt such fulfillment. David had been assigned to a sudden overseas business trip just a week before my due date. It was an important project in Shanghai that required his expertise as an investment analyst. Working for a major securities firm, he typically had about 4 overseas trips per year. Although he tried repeatedly to decline, I encouraged him. "It's okay. My parents will help," I said. In retrospect, that decision was right. Thanks to my parents' support, I was able to approach childbirth with peace of mind. Outside the car window, the scenery of Denver's quiet residential area rolled by. The houses in the Cherry Creek North District stood in neat rows, each with well-maintained gardens and an elegant appearance. I remembered the day I met David in this town 3 years ago, at a Christmas charity event at St. John's Church. I had a booth selling handmade baby items. "This might be perfect for my niece," said the tall man who approached me. That was David. Dressed in a navy suit, he exuded a calm demeanor. I later learned he didn't actually have a niece. It was just an excuse to start a conversation. But somehow, that honest confession became one of the reasons I grew fond of him. Over the next 6 months, he pursued me earnestly. He always invited me on dates during holidays and showed understanding for my work. After those 6 months of dating, we had a small wedding ceremony, attended only by both families and close friends. I vividly remember Elizabeth, David's mother, maintaining a gentle smile throughout the ceremony as she sat beside me. Elizabeth was a former bank branch manager, an intellectual and dignified woman. With a bearing that belied her 63 years, she always maintained an appropriate distance in her interactions with us. Having lost her husband early, she had raised David admirably on her own. She now lived alone in our neighborhood. Weekly dinner gatherings had become a tradition, and on the surface, we had built an ideal mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship. After marriage, my online shop continued to grow steadily. My handmade baby items gained popularity through word of mouth, particularly the nursing pillows and swaddle blankets. As social media buzz spread, I achieved annual sales of $100,000. Just as the business I built with my own hands started to take off, I discovered I was pregnant. When Elizabeth heard the news, she immediately began preparing baby items. "This has been my dream," she said with tears in her eyes as she started knitting a blanket. That blanket, made with light blue and cream-colored yarn, remains Sophia's favorite. David smiled wryly at his mother's unchanged meticulousness but was deeply happy. As I entered the second trimester, my morning sickness subsided, and peaceful days continued. While working, I prepared for the birth. I would stock up on organic ingredients from Whole Foods Market and try to maintain a balanced diet. During our weekly dinners, Elizabeth would share her experiences with childbirth and child-rearing. Though some of her ideas were a bit old-fashioned, I was grateful for her sincere attitude. On weekends, we would participate in block parties in the neighborhood. Community members would offer warm words whenever they saw my belly. In particular, the Johnsons who lived across the street treated me like their own grandchild, often bringing homemade muffins. As the due date approached, David struggled to adjust his work schedule. However, an unexpected overseas business trip came up. His track record at the securities firm had earned him this important project. Though he tried to decline, I encouraged him. If I gave birth at my parents' home, I would have their support. Besides, Elizabeth promised, I'll come running if anything happens. The birth at my parents' home in Boulder was more comfortable than expected. My mother looked after my daily meals and health, while my father took charge of hospital transportation. The delivery proceeded as planned, and on January 15th, a healthy baby girl was born. Her weight of 7 pounds was standard, and the doctor gave his approval. Thanks to my parents' dedicated support during the 6-week recovery period at their home, I was able to recover both physically and mentally at my own pace. And now, I was on my way home with my beloved daughter. David was scheduled to return from Shanghai tomorrow, and my heart was racing with thoughts of our new family life about to begin. The final checkup at Rose Medical Center had gone well, with both Sophia and I receiving a clean bill of health. Denver's winter sky looked gray, as if snow might fall at any moment, but my heart was full of hope like awaiting the arrival of spring. The weather forecast predicted heavy snow by evening. I needed to get home and unpack before then. My father carried the luggage to the entrance, while my mother, holding Sophia, expressed her desire to see the new granddaughter's room. Indeed, my parents hadn't yet seen the baby's room that we had prepared before the birth. Light pink wallpaper, a white crib that David had assembled during his days off. From the ceiling hung a handmade mobile, a gift from Elizabeth, swaying gently. "Won't you come in and look around? Maybe have some tea?" I offered, but my father looked out the window, checked his watch, and shook his head. "The snow's supposed to get worse. We should head back early. It's quite a distance to Boulder." "You're right," my mother said with a slightly disappointed expression as she gently returned Sophia to my arms. As I felt her tiny weight, I realized how much my parents had helped us over these 6 weeks. "Thank you so much for taking care of me and Sophia these 6 weeks." As I choked up, my mother smiled gently. "Of course. Besides, we were the ones who were happy to spend time with such an adorable granddaughter." After seeing my parents off, I looked around the house. After 6 weeks of absence, the rooms were a bit dusty. Although David had supposedly checked on the house during his business trip, there were several areas that caught my eye as a woman. Dust had settled thinly on the coffee table, and the houseplant's leaves were noticeably dusty. I needed to clean a bit before David returned tomorrow. First, I should carry the luggage to Sophia's room and organize the necessities. The bags from my parents' house were still at the entrance. Baby clothes neatly folded by my mother, lots of diapers. It would be quite a task to put everything away. Thinking it would be difficult to organize while holding the baby, I placed Sophia in her crib. Mama's just going to do a little work, okay? As I whispered this, Sophia sighed softly and fell into an even deeper sleep. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Small snowflakes kept attaching to the window panes and melting. By tomorrow morning, the garden would probably be completely white. Before that, I should get the luggage from the car. Oh right, my car. The car David had driven when taking me to my parents' house for the birth should still be in the garage. I should load the luggage into it before David returns tomorrow. We'll need it for the baby's hospital visits and shopping. Besides, if it's going to snow heavily soon, it would be better to have the car outside. After checking once more that Sophia was sleeping, I turned on the baby monitor. Small speakers transmitted her regular breathing sounds. Although I would be taking my eyes off her for just a few minutes to go to the garage, looking at my daughter's peacefully sleeping face assured me it would be fine. I left the front door and headed to the garage. Though it was just past 2 p.m., the sky was surprisingly dark. Snow clouds hung low, and cold wind stung my cheeks. I needed to get the car out quickly and load the luggage. I would also need to brush off the snow that had accumulated on the windshield. The moment I opened the garage door and reached for the driver's side door, it happened. Breaking through the silence, a piercing siren echoed through the residential area. In my peripheral vision, I saw 3 police cars burst out from the side street and surround my car. The police vehicle's headlights flashed blue through the falling snow. Huh? What? Police officers with guns drawn began surrounding the car one after another. The scene felt like it was happening in slow motion. The movements of the uniformed men seemed surreal. Was this a dream? Or was I seeing things due to post-birth fatigue? From inside the house, Sophia began to cry. She must have been startled by the sudden siren sound. Her crying forcefully reminded me that this situation was real. This vehicle has been reported as stolen. The officer's words pierced through me like a cold wind. That's wrong. This is my car. All the purchase documents are inside the house. I screamed desperately. However, the officers showed no mercy as they began to handcuff me. The coldness of the metal conveyed the weight of reality. I stared at the documents thrust before my trembling hands. There were unfamiliar signatures and unbelievable text. My car's registration information had been altered by someone. My mind went blank. Why, this is my car. Even my inner voice was trembling. However, this was just the beginning of the confusion. Before being pushed into the police vehicle, I screamed desperately. My baby is in the house. A 2-week-old baby is alone. Please, my baby. The officers showed momentary hesitation on their faces. However, protocol couldn't be changed. I was to be taken to the police station. From the back seat of the patrol car, I watched my house grow smaller and smaller. Sophia's crying still echoed in my ears. The interrogation room was unnaturally white and cold. The fluorescent lighting made the situation feel even more surreal. No matter how much I explained, the officers continued their questions mechanically. My heart felt crushed by panic and anxiety. What was happening to Sophia? A mere 2-week-old baby, alone in the house. I couldn't reach David either. He should be on his return flight from Shanghai. My phone screen showed over 10 missed calls. I needed to notify my parents too. This must be some mistake. It's my car. All the documents were submitted through proper procedures. But that's not my signature. Someone must have. Then why is your car the subject of a stolen vehicle report? The questions continued endlessly. But my mind was filled with thoughts of Sophia. Was she crying? Was she hungry? Was she cold? It must have been 2 hours since her last feeding. Anger at the absurd situation and worry for my baby swirled within me. Tears rolled down my cheeks. But this was no time for crying. I needed to explain the situation as calmly as possible. Just as I thought this, the interrogation room door opened. Regarding the baby, we've contacted Child Protective Services. At those words, my heart nearly stopped. The world seemed to crumble silently. While the words, Child Protective Services, still echoed coldly in my ears, the interrogation room door opened again, and a female detective in a suit entered. Her light blue suit seemed strangely fitting in this sterile atmosphere. Mrs. Martin, I'd like to clarify the situation. A thick file was already placed on the desk. She pulled out several documents from it. The purchase contract, registration documents, and the problematic stolen vehicle report. The detective's efficiency suggested the depth of their investigation. First, about the timing. Why now, right after giving birth? Indeed, I thought. The car had been left in the garage for 6 weeks. So why today? Actually, the stolen vehicle report was filed the day after you gave birth. Those words sent chills down my spine. The day after birth. At that time, I was in the hospital bed, holding newborn Sophia. David had already left for Shanghai. Who would have known that timing? No, the number of people who could have known was limited. The documents bear the certification stamp of an official DMV employee. However, the detective spread the papers before me. Handwriting analysis of the signatures revealed clear signs of forgery. I gasped. Next to the signature was indeed an unfamiliar seal. However, the seal itself appeared genuine. As if proper procedures had been followed. This would be impossible without an inside collaborator at the DMV. Then, a memory from the hospital surfaced. The day Elizabeth came to visit, when she offered to take my bag and car keys with her, saying she would check on the house. And she was a former bank branch manager. She must have extensive connections in financial institutions. Interesting footage was found on the garage security camera. The detective operated a tablet. The night before your delivery, someone approached your car. The screen showed someone's back view. However, due to the angle and lighting, the face couldn't be confirmed. But the walking style was familiar. That dignified walk with a straight back. According to neighborhood testimony, an unfamiliar car was seen coming and going through the residential area multiple times that day. The Johnsons, in particular, provided an interesting statement. The detective pulled out new notes. Late at night, a black sedan passed by repeatedly. The driver was a middle-aged woman, someone they regularly saw in the neighborhood. Next, a bank report was shown. Evidence of large cash withdrawals from my account. However, I was definitely hospitalized at that time. The documents bore masterfully forged signatures. Perfect reproduction of detailed procedure characteristics that only a former bank employee would know. Furthermore, we received interesting testimony from hospital staff. The detective turned to a new page. A woman who frequently visited during your hospitalization was apparently trying persistently to extract personal information from the nurses. What kind of information? The attending physician's schedule, night shift arrangements, security card management methods, unusually detailed information that a normal visitor wouldn't care about. At that moment, all the dots began connecting. The suspicious figure the night before delivery. The bank withdrawals. The hospital behavior. And the true intent hidden behind Elizabeth's kindness. How she had casually checked documents with my signature during weekly dinners. How she had tried to extract information about my banking history through casual conversation. And the scenes of her speaking unusually familiarly with hospital staff. This seems beyond mere coincidence. The detective's voice echoed quietly. Someone deliberately planned this, targeting the timing of your delivery. And that person knows your life intimately. My hands trembled. Elizabeth's past behavior flashed through my mind like a slideshow. Her gentle smile at the wedding. Her kind attitude during weekly dinners. Her joy at my pregnancy. Her words before the birth, "I'll come running if anything happens." And David's overseas trip. Could that have been part of the calculation too? A mother's words could move her son's heart more than anyone else's. I recalled the scene of Elizabeth chatting familiarly with the receptionist at Rose Medical Center. She had said they were her client from her banking days. If she had been building connections over years for such a plan. Was it all an act? Or was someone else behind this? Mrs. Martin, the detective's voice interrupted my thoughts. Is there anyone around you capable of executing such a meticulous plan? Someone familiar with DMV and financial institutions? I didn't want to answer. Didn't want to say that name. But for Sophia. For our family. My mother-in-law. My voice trembled slightly. Elizabeth Martin. She's a former bank branch manager with many connections. The air in the interrogation room seemed to freeze for a moment. The detective put down her pen and looked straight at me. Could you tell us more about Elizabeth Martin? At that moment, my cell phone rang. It was from David. The cell phone's ringtone broke the silence of the interrogation room. It was David. The detective hesitated briefly but allowed the call considering the circumstances. Rachel. I'm heading to the police station now. Sophia. She's safe now, the detective said quietly. Child Protective Services staff are handling it appropriately. As those words slightly eased my tension, there was a knock on the interrogation room door. A field investigator hurriedly entered. A GPS tracker was found under the car. The investigator held up an evidence bag. The small device inside made all suspicions definitive. Tracing the manufacturing number, we identified the purchaser. It was bought with Elizabeth Martin's credit card. At that moment, another officer burst into the room. Elizabeth Martin is at the station's front entrance. She's turning herself in. The unexpected development froze everyone in the room. The detective moved immediately. "Mrs. Martin, please wait here for a while longer." 15 minutes later, I was escorted to another room. There sat Elizabeth, in tears. Her usual dignified demeanor had vanished, and she looked like nothing more than a tired old woman. "Rachel. I'm sorry." Her voice was so faint, I could hardly believe it belonged to the Elizabeth I knew. "It was all my doing." Elizabeth's confession was delivered calmly, yet in vivid detail. The plan had begun the day she learned of my pregnancy. Using her connections as a former bank branch manager, she had enlisted help from her former colleague at the DMV. She had prepared the forged documents timing them with my delivery, attached a GPS tracker when borrowing my car keys, and monitored my movements. "Don't tell me even David's business trip." Elizabeth nodded slightly at my question. "The Shanghai project came through a connection from my banking days." Just then, David entered the room. He must have come straight from the airport, still pulling his suitcase. "Mother, why?" His voice carried deep sadness rather than anger. Elizabeth pulled out an old photograph with trembling hands. It was of David's father, my father-in-law. I'd heard he passed away 10 years ago. "It was a promise I made to your father in his final moments." Elizabeth's voice broke. "Always protect our son's happiness," he said, but somewhere along the way, that meaning became twisted in my mind. Holding the photograph to her chest, she continued. "David got married and started a new family. That should have been wonderful, but something inside me couldn't accept it. Even our weekly dinners felt like superficial relationships." Her perfectionism had manifested this twisted love into a perfect plan. The Rose Medical Center staff, the DMV employee, the timing of the police report, everything had been meticulously calculated. But when I heard Sophia crying, Elizabeth's voice trembled. That child's cry tore through my heart. What was I doing? The detective quietly stopped the voice recorder. That completes the formal statement. The subsequent legal proceedings moved more smoothly than expected. With Elizabeth's surrender and full cooperation, along with our decision to withdraw charges, she received a suspended sentence. A week later, we were gathered in our living room. Elizabeth sat on the sofa, still appearing somewhat unsettled. Her counseling had just begun. "Let's make a new promise," I said while holding Sophia. "This time, all of us together." David quietly sat beside his mother. "I want you to remember, Mother, the true meaning of your promise with Father." Elizabeth tentatively reached out to Sophia. The tiny hand grasped her finger. In that moment, a new light appeared in her eyes. "I understand now." Elizabeth's voice no longer trembled. "Protecting happiness isn't about control. It's about watching over with love." Outside the window, last week's snow was slowly melting. Soft sunlight streamed in, heralding the arrival of spring. "Rachel." Elizabeth looked at me. From now on, if we could become a real family. I nodded quietly at her words. There's no such thing as a perfect family. But maybe a true family is about accepting each other's imperfections while gradually growing closer together. The ringtone of that cell phone I heard in the interrogation room now feels like a distant memory. David gently embraces my shoulder while Elizabeth gazes at Sophia. "Hey, Sophia," I whispered to my daughter. "You're surrounded by so much love. Even love that took the wrong form is now finding its right direction." The baby smiled slightly, as if she understood. In the photo frame by the window, David's father smiled quietly. It was a peaceful afternoon, as if everything was finally falling into its proper place. 3 months later, on a spring afternoon, we were leaving the courthouse. Elizabeth's final hearing had concluded, and her suspended sentence was officially confirmed. The conditions included regular counseling sessions and restricted contact with us. "So it's all over now," I murmured, sitting next to David as he drove. In the back seat, Sophia slept contentedly. Looking at our daughter's sleeping face, now grown remarkably large for just 3 months, I could feel a peaceful happiness. The detective from Denver Police District 3 had handled everything thoughtfully until the end. Considering Elizabeth's complete confession, remorse, and our wishes, they had worked to resolve the matter as quietly as possible. The investigation into the former DMV employee had also progressed, revealing internal misconduct. "Mom's counseling seems to be going well," David said quietly. During weekly video calls, Elizabeth's expression had gradually softened. She was slowly beginning to verbalize the sense of loss and loneliness behind her obsessive perfectionism. Our lives had also begun to find a new rhythm. The online shop, which had been temporarily closed, reopened last week. Orders had increased from before, with the handmade nursing pillows even developing a waiting list. Perhaps the biggest change was in our relationship with the neighborhood. After the incident, many residents, starting with the Johnsons, had extended helping hands. At weekend block parties, everyone doted on Sophia. Surprisingly, our damaged trust was healing through community connections. On our way home from the courthouse, we stopped at Whole Foods Market. We needed to buy ingredients for Elizabeth's home recovery, which would begin next week. She would be allowed supervised visits at home. "This is your mother's favorite herbal tea, isn't it?" I picked up a box from the shelf. "Right, Mom's really into herbal tea lately," David smiled gently. On our way to the checkout, we paused in the baby section. A small hat caught my eye, with colors similar to the blanket Elizabeth had knitted. "Let's buy it," David said. "Mom will be happy." When we got home, there was an email waiting. It was from St. John's Church. The head priest had offered to provide a venue for family counseling. Perhaps we could take a new step forward in that church where David and I had met 3 years ago. At dusk, we sat on the small deck in our garden. A gentle spring breeze swept through the quiet residential area of Cherry Creek North. "Hey," I said while holding Sophia. "I wonder what will happen from here on." David reached out and gently embraced Sophia and me. "We'll take it one step at a time. Instead of seeking perfection, let's just be a family as we are." That night, I called Elizabeth for the first time in a while. "Looking forward to next week?" "Yes," This time, let's take it slowly. After hanging up, I peeked into Sophia's room where David was reading her a picture book. His profile was exactly like that of the beloved son Elizabeth had carefully raised. Perhaps the mistake of pursuing a perfect family image had paradoxically taught us the true meaning of family. Though it may not be an ideal form, it's a journey we take together, accepting each other's imperfections. We now stand at the beginning of that path.